I've worked with multiple founders on Forbes 30 under 30 and countless other founders as well of different agencies to help them be more effective. Some of the people that on Forbes 30 under 30 would have 5 different companies and a bunch of data that they need to keep track of, and also then still figure out like how to set the workflows to again be as efficient and move all the companies forward in the most effective way. And in that, I basically have come up with an approach to handle and manage all these different workflows, so you can be as efficient as possible to be able to move towards your main goal. And basically with that, let me just jump in and give you a little explanation of how we do that. This is going both across personal and the work related, because again, if you're looking at achieving peak performance, it goes across both of the sides there. Yeah, with that, let's just get into it. So basically, if you have any type of goal you're trying to achieve, right, and you haven't achieved it yet, there's just a bunch of work that you need to do to get to it. Now, there's also this discussion about like, how do you decide what the most important thing is? How do you decide what the goal even should be? But those would be a separate conversation from here. Right now, we're just looking at what are the workflows that basically enables you to be able to move as efficiently as possible towards the overall goal. So, fundamentally, right, if you could work for 100 hours straight, or 200 hours straight, on the most important thing to be able to move towards the goal, you should do that. For you to achieve peak performance, that's basically what you want to achieve. Now, to what happens or what comes up during in that process as well is that there will come up different feelings. There will be other things you also will need to be able to maintain, because if you don't maintain them, that you will not be able to be as efficient when you then are working on the most important thing. So a lot of people have talked about like habits, and I do this thing every day at this specific time, and others have like, oh, you should stack this habit after that other. I just been like, you always will have a feeling for hunger. At some point you will get fatigued. At some point you will get tired enough that you cannot continue to work. And if you were to continue to work, the output is way worse compared to if you then took a nap or actually slept properly. So the question then becomes, well, if you have these feelings that comes up, as we all do, let's stack all habits. Let's stack all workflows and things you need to do to maintain and enable you to use as much time on working as possible upon those. So instead of saying, I need to do this every day at 10 a.m., then what it is, well, we define what happens when you get tired, when the evening routine, what happens with the sleep, the morning routine, the work, what you do initially when you start working on the computer, and then you just does the work there. And what we just try to do is we try to maximize and trim these workflows here, like so it's the least amount of things that needs to get done, and being able to do it as again and as efficiently as possible. And I mean, again, like resting efficiently, right? Like this can literally be looking at a wall or meditating or something else again. But then now it gets into the content of the individual ones. But the main idea here, or the first idea is, we want to stack all the things you do upon whatever feeling you are having. The next thing that basically comes into play in connection with this is then time tracking. And there's a lot of feelings, a lot of different actions or ways that people start thinking about it when it comes to time tracking. And so now my thinking about it is we want to make it frictionless to get the time tracking. That's one. And two, why is it even important to get the time tracking and so? The main reason that becomes quite important is because as you basically grow in your company, you need to figure out where is it makes sense to now start outsourcing a part of it. What is actually your hourly effectively rates? Where if you hire someone else, it makes sense to get someone else to do it. Like when does it make sense to both get someone else to do the cooking and cleaning as well for you and taking care of like the home thing, as well as hiring in admin and so on. But I mean, if you go back to when I initially did it, I was tracking all my time. This was even before I started like a company. And I was using here Toggl where I did basically have to like click start and stop every time I switched something. I would need to write out like what are the individual thing that basically was done. And it's just kind of a headache in some sense to do it. I mean, another thing as well about this thing about the time tracking is that when you're working on your own and you basically have wanted to figure out, well, how much time does it actually take to deliver something? You also can figure out like what is actually the cost of time to then get something delivered, and then you can also then use it in some connection with pricing. But if you don't know what's happening and what's going on now, it becomes much more difficult to actually then doing the skill part of the skilling of it. So first was basically like manual like setup there, and then having to press start and stop and so on. Now, if we want to getting all the way close to actually doing frictionless time tracking, we need way more pieces here in place. And the first one was basically Siri shortcuts came out. Siri shortcuts. And basically it enabled you to be able to press just one button on your phone, and then it will be able to do multiple steps. And basically what you end up with is like having like this like list of these things that basically happens whenever you press a specific button. So basically that's a step up from it. It's better, but it's still like frictionless time tracking. So if you go back now like to it, what I then basically get on the upwards here is you can see this. Well, then individual buttons for all the different things that you basically could be doing there also on the personal side. Nice, it's better. Like now you just press basically a button, like for example food shopping there, and it will open up, also for the page for it. But basically like then originally you just start the time tracker for it. The next layer that then comes on top of it is that when you're looking at all the different things you're basically doing, there's usually some kind of information you also need to get access to whenever you need to do that thing. So for example, after eating, you will have like usually a bit less focus than you normally have. So this thing of going through emails, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, like all those different communication channels, at least once a day, getting through it and get it cleared out, then would make sense to do. Now, I mean, I can even show the workflow there for it, but basically I end up here with like then a button you just press, and then it will open up the tabs for it as well. And I anyways need to go to those tabs, so by pressing it, it will also then change the time tracker. Let me just show the example there, like with like for example food shopping from it, or I could also show another one for like recording proposals. Let me just show the one with proposals first. So basically this page here, you can see right now the time tracker is on one thing because I was just on this page before. Basically, just by going to this page, it will change the time tracker that you now are basically doing. Doing the deciding on what you to work on, and then you can see here that then it goes like 2 entries there. So it's just that one there, and then we now have this one that's running here, and then basically you end up. I just press this one, and sort of open up. I'll usually just have this as like the last tab first, and then when you then press it, then the tab will then open up on the right side of it. So we can just do it one more time. Click done. And then go back to, I click done here as well, I go back to also deciding what to work on. But then this is just built with Claude Code, like you can use your own, just build out yourself as well and so on. But basically in connection with doing those proposals, I'll need to both record or have like open up for all these different things I built beforehand to show those. And then it's also open up for the pipeline where I can like see and jump into an interval one and so on. So I'm not doing anything additional. I anyways need to access these pages in connection with this workflow, and then it also then changes the time tracker to then be that now I'm recording these proposals. If you take the same example there then from the phone, then basically you see here like food shopping, and then I press food shopping, and then what will happen then is it will open up for basically the page with the things to also buy there, almonds, olivins, and shower swamp thing. Yes, basically, so that's kind of like again also the thing of like you put in the button there. Now even the thing with food shopping, like me showing up at the supermarket will just open up the page there as well. So based on location, so that's kind of like the next thing as well. Like so, whenever you go to a specific location, you can then get like the time tracking to line up with it. So basically every single one of these, except for the yellow ones, has a button contained to it. It has either a trigger when based on our location. The thing with alarm is a little different, but basically you end up with that. And it opens up the information that's relevant for it as well. And then that is, again, what enables you to get that captures the time tracking across everything you're doing that, without really doing anything additional. But if you're just doing the thing with the thing that's like location based, you don't even need to then it just runs out in the background for it. So that's one layer of it, right? The next layer in some sense is kind of like mapping out, well, when you then basically here on your computer and so on, how can we set up then either a Notion page or something else so you can be like as quickly go in and work on the most important tasks. So this one over here that you saw before is basically for recurring tasks or a workflow there. Now, if there's something where like, yeah, it's especially doing the review of it, so basically if I just like run this one, then it'll open up for the Notion page. This was basically the main one I was using beforehand, where again the same idea where you click the start button there, and then by clicking start, you also change the time tracker. Again, this is like some demo data, yeah. But basically what you then see here is then the most important task. You see this sync up with Google Calendar, pull in some meetings there, and then you can see like the different things that's lined out as well there. Now I basically just recovered here like the food shopping item there. So it would basically, yeah, be back again. So if I now click again the food shopping there, what you will see as well, it will disappear the food shopping item from down here. So that's basically because it's being marked as done, as well as like just pressing the button or showing up basically at the supermarket. So sometimes it just takes a moment there for it to load. I can also just reload the page here, and then you'll be able to see it's be gone. Yes, and the reason this also becomes interesting because basically I've set it up so as well, like on the phone, it automatically adds in the alarms for the time of these for the items you see down here, and this way basically, yeah, you don't even need to think about anything. As long as you just follow the workflow and the plan for the day, then you will get, yeah, an alarm that will remind you of doing the thing. So that's basically what this one part is showing here, is that you don't need to think about time. If you plan out the day there, then there will be the alarm that will be reminding you, or if you have a meeting, just make sure you set up like notifications so you get those notifications beforehand. And that will then remind you to either leave, so you can go to transportation. In some sense, transportation to a Zoom meeting is 1 minute, and then you can do the socialization and come back again, transportate back to the computer. But that's kind of like the idea that if you need to go somewhere and meet with someone. Yes. So again, the thing there with the Notion, so you end up having a quick through the inbox and so on, and then you kind of like go through those different steps to then figure out what the most important task is, and then you then do that task. Again, like the thing about deciding what the most important task is a little bit of an additional like setup and discussion. So I will leave that for a separate video. Yeah, so it's basically like just idea like again of like in some sense laying out, well, what are all those different things and habits are that you first get defined in some sense here with like the different workflows. And then afterwards, trying to then lay them out, well, what will the schedule actually looks like roughly in a day? Again, the thing about like, we will get to a point where we can also look then as like hour by hour, but it's more interesting just to make sure that they are put in sequence in the right order. And again, the thing about like, your attention should be here working on the most important task. And then you might either get an alarm that would tell you need to now go over into this meeting. That would be an emotion, or you just do something that's unintentionally not important and not good, and you should get rid of this for God's sake. But if there's an emotion there again, like then that's where like it lines up with this, and you ideally and roughly want to then just do the eating and so on later in the day. I'm eating keto, so I literally don't need to think about eating the entire day. And then it's first like in the evening where they will be like, oh, I might need to soon eat something, and so. Yeah, and then there's also getting into some planning stuff and other things of like just roughly laying out like if you want to review a day, week, month, I should say here, per quarter and year, and then basically learn from it to then plan the next day and so on. So you then keep having only hunger later in the day, or having all the other things like later in the day, and you can use as much time again as possible there. That's kind of like tying in this thing as well. So the thing of just getting rough like layout of this, of what are the different components, then getting a rough like layout, like what are the order that makes sense, and then finally in some sense trying to lay it out, well, what would actually even seem reasonable for you to basically have on a calendar. Don't follow this to a T. Do as much work in a focus block as you can. Don't say that's all because it's the time down and I need to take a break. No. Just do as much work as you possibly can, but roughly just get an idea of if you have with a meeting or something else to line up. I probably need a little bit buffer time to transportation or whatever it could be, but that's kind of like then the idea of this calendar section there. And then in some sense, then it's like laying out. You can lay out the workflows there and figure out like what other things you anyways are opening up for and so on you need to get access to. And you can then also build out there with Claude Code your own buttons here. And again, the idea is like you end up having the tabs that needs to get opened, or on the phone that's been opening up the right pages you anyways need to get access to. It's changing then the time tracker. I then also have a spreadsheet where I just end up logging it, and now Superbase, which is basically a database that you can use in Claude Code to basically make sure that it's sent to. So you get those things. Then you can even do something that it also changes the lights. So when you get home, it turns on the light and so. So then setting up like that you can do with shortcuts down on the phone. I can also just show you briefly as well when it comes to the location based. So if you open up like Siri shortcuts, and you go into shortcuts, and you then at the bottom click on location, then you can basically use those as well to figure out the different things. And now basically also with Claude Code, right? Basically then you can also then basically looking at then skills. So for example, when you then open up for the flow that is connected to, you run the flow there for example recording proposals, and you ended up having then this laid out. Then basically what I'll be looking at is, so I just like told them to say some blah blah, so like it doesn't include the previous things that it says. But basically, right, like since the Claude Code have been part of then basically generating and building out this, you can then basically talk to it. Sometimes you can move it over there on the right side, so you just have like one tab there, and then have it next to the things inside. Other than you can just like, oh, to do this thing or do that thing and so on. I'll probably have a separate video that go a little more in detail with it. But again, like it's just more than you get Claude and the Claude skills that it has lined up around again the workflow. So when we talk about the workflow there on the business side there, then in some sense, just take this is like a basic example for like also doing like outreach, where you basically in some sense find the interesting like job post that is being posted there on Upwork, where a company basically have some projects or something else that they basically needing help with to get this set up. And then you basically looking at like your previous stuff you built out, and then come with a proposal for like how you could basically solve that project. And here then AI will then be able to do the rating of the job post, and then afterwards you just do the recording. And I basically in some sense set it up so you end up with. So basically, if you take one of these, then it's formats it. At least this makes sense for me, because I kind of want to get an idea of like what's the structure of the company. Do we have a goal of the company? What are the different components of the company roughly? What are the bottleneck in some sense of it? And basically AI is taking the content that they took and then reformatting the structure, and then based on things that I already know and so on, then it will be able to give a guess at what probably the bottleneck is and so on. And this is a format that makes much more sense in my head to read, rather than doing what it would do. So this is kind of like getting the thing of like these different workflows set up that then goes around in Claude Code. I might just keep a separate video where I go a little bit more detail with how you can then use Claude Code in some sense for defining the workflows. But it's more again like giving this example of like you can clearly define what are the different things that needs to happen, and where can Claude also, for example, take the things that you already from previous like successful like projects and use that to figure out which ones are better and which ones are worse. So when you see the rating over there, I mean it's also coming manually from like copy pasting content from interesting like job posts there, and then pasting them, and then it lays out, give it the rating, it formats information in the format that I will need, and then I can go in and then do actually the recording and send it over to them. So that's just one example. Then there's also one for cold email. There's also one for like for the content that I'm now like producing. You can see a bit more of, and so that's kind of like how we end up with the workflows. We want these workflows. We end up with some other flowcharts as well that shows like how things are basically being done. I have another one, but a system map, which kind of goes through the initial setup here as well of like you need to decide what the most important thing is, then there's a copilot, then there's these different other workflows that then happens afterwards, and so this is again like you're taking this piece over here and then you're expanding it out on the work side, to then move things move along. Good. So that kind of like explains each of these buttons here ends up with a button, except for those like yellow ones there from basically from the phone, or then on the computer you can end up with like a button you can basically press, like that's one over here where you press it and then it opens up the tabs, change the time tracker and so. So this way you also get this basically captured, and then also if we then look over here, you also in some sense get laid out there like what are the order and when does it make sense for the different things, and when is it a reminder or something else. So basically you getting this laid out and using this here to figure out, well, which sequence does it make sense to do these things in to when you're then doing that block or so. And then there's the actual steps you would be doing there. So for example, the email thing there, responding to that, that's kind of like part of this flow. And then, so you kind of go a little bit in detail of what you're actually then doing afterwards. And then you can use that again to then lay out the calendar, so you also get that lined out cleanly. And then you can be looking at, well, once you have a rough understanding or idea of like what are different workflows that need to be done, you can also then use then Claude Code to then be able to be part of then laying out and helping you to do that. So you then can use the conversations here to lay out. I mean, there's even more things about like roles you can define. There's something called holacracy you can then use as well for each of these steps here, and then help you basically define and lay those pieces out so you can do those as efficiently as possible. But I just want to give you here a broader like understanding of like how these different workflows should align up with the softwares you're basically having on the phone, on the computer, and with Claude Code and so on. So you end up basically bundling together all the different things that needs to be done in a block there. You can even lay out the SOPs, like the steps you're also taking. In some cases I'll be doing that. So basically what you see here is an example of like the finances of a company with the different tools and how the different programs basically relate to each other. And you try to get as much done than by the computer, so you can just do it. So here we're for example taking invoices from Stripe and then moving over to the accounting program. So then basically this one then does that. But the things you still figure out that needs to be done by a person, you can then end up then, in this case, and it's basically laid out here inside of Notion. So if we jump over there, click here, then you basically end up with then 12 different steps. You then can have the actual text, a video showing how to do it, the tabs need to be opened up. And then basically like when you click this link here, it will open up tabs for that workflow. So again, it's the same idea of like getting clearly define those workflows there first here, and then afterwards find out like what are the tools, tabs, and so on that make sense. And in this case, then also then having the steps. I mean, this is basically just like logging in to the accounting program, but then you have the other steps afterwards again. So you press the link there, it says, oh, you're doing the food shopping for the duration, and then you basically sign in here. And then once you signed in, one of the tabs is in the steps on how to sign in, and then you have the video there also showing it. From last year as well. And then basically these tabs you see here is basically what's being used to open up the workflow as well. So let me close that as well. So just again, like this is another way. That was the way I basically was doing it beforehand across everything, before then Claude Code came in and then was enabling me to then use now this flow here to then start doing it for multiple of the different pieces. Good. I feel like we kind of like went through a bit here, like now the different workflows, like how they're basically being managed across different, you can say like areas, different examples of then using Notion, using, you can say here, Claude Code to be able to run different flows. And you basically just want to stack as many things as possible. Time tracking is usually always one that's part of it. The thing of opening up the tabs is also usually always a part of it. And third thing of then capturing into a log the things that should be opened up as well. Makes sense? If it's in personal stuff and so on, you can also turn on the lights as one part of it, and changing the light to a specific color. And if it's when relation to the work, right, then you can have it also then log like every time you then there's like a specific amount of proposals or so on. And you just try to again log in and be able to use shorten them, make them more efficient. You can see then on the time tracking as well how much time has been used on different parts. And then yeah, there's another video I'll talk about the possibilities and so on. You can then look at for them to figure out like how profitable the different sections are. So it's kind of like a rough wrap up here of it. I'll probably also make a version 2 of this video here when as much. But feel free to let me know what your thoughts about it. As there's a lot of components here, a part of the setup. And if you have any questions as well, feel free to ask. And with that, I just hope you have an absolutely wonderful day and a lot of productive and efficient workflows. Have a great day.